Hello, everyone, and welcome to How Grief is Impacting Your Clients. I'm Katie Ressler, licensed counselor, transformative grief guide, and creator of the Legacy Growth Certification Program, teaching you how to work with your clients on the hidden grief in their lives. Today, I have Natasha. She's an amazing relationship coach who also has experienced expat life, which if you've watched that video, which was episode 2, then you know expat life has its own grief work. So we'll be probably talking about our own grief work we've done, as well as our clients' work. Natasha, share with me what you do, who you serve, and where you're doing what you do.
Thanks so much, Katie, for that intro. So I am a certified and accredited relationship and divorce coach. So I use a science-based coaching model, and I work with clients to help them navigate their life essentially with more courage, clarity, and confidence. But what does that look like? So as a relationship coach, I can help clients to improve their relationship with themselves as well as their partner, learn how to communicate compassionately, raise their sense of self-worth, tackle some of those limiting beliefs that come up, the ones that are holding them back from having the most amazing relationship, and taking responsibility but never blame for any challenges that they face in their relationship as well. And I'm doing this currently from Lagos, West Africa. I just moved here a week ago.
Awesome. And do you see your clients primarily online, or are you building up in person as well?
Yeah, so that's how I was able to move my business here. Everything is online. So I have clients from Hong Kong all the way across to California. So I'm always working the time zones, but it's all via Zoom. Yeah,
I love that. And yes, time zones, man, that's always the fun. Like, wait, where are you? And is it daylight saving yet?
I've definitely made the mistake where daylight savings changed in London, but didn't change in California. I'm like, why can't you all just change at the same time?
Right.
But California changes, I think, 2 weeks after us. And so I did have one session the first year. I did it a few years ago where I totally missed the person by an hour.
Yep, I've had the same problem as well. And you're like, are you here? Where are you? And then, oh, I messed up. I'm the one with the time wrong. Well, what are some of the key issues clients come to you for?
Yeah, so more recently, it's actually, I used to work predominantly with women, and more recently, it's actually been a lot of couples. Life has so many hurdles, right? You're single, you get together, it's exciting. There isn't any real responsibility, quote unquote. And then, you maybe buy a home together, one of you gets a promotion, you have kids, maybe you have another kid, and people just aren't communicating. They're leaving a lot to assumption, like, he should know that, he knows me, or she just needs to do that, she always did it. And it was like, wait a minute, he knows you, but now you're a different person, and she used to do it, but now maybe she has 3 other things on her plate. So in that lack of communication, that's when the bickering kind of starts. And that's what I'm seeing coming up a lot now with people who are with young children, and then recently a couple who'd been married 28 years. So
yeah.
But they say in their kind of admission that it's been 10 years of before they've come to seek help, that it's not been great. And that is life. Most people wait until it's unbearable, or you hit rock bottom before they're like, now we got to do something.
I always liken it to your car. You don't wait till you can't see through the windshield. The check engine light is like completely been on for weeks and tires are flat and you can't drive it anymore. You usually go when, hey, the check engine light starts. There's some warning signs. But often with couples, there's this feeling of either I don't have time, I can do it myself, or there's really a bigger problem here if I ask for help. And in reality, we all don't go into relationships knowing really how to do it effectively, how to be in healthy relationships.
Yes, because with communication, and I agree with you with the car analogy, I've used it before as well. I'm always like, you go and get an MOT in the UK every year. Like, your car is not roadworthy without it. You have to pass the MOT, and yet you won't do the same thing for your relationship. But I would say to people that communication is one of those things that was modeled to us. We were never explicitly taught how to communicate. Now, that's fine if the person modeling in the blueprint version we then take into our own lives was a good one. But if it isn't, and you don't address that and learn how to do it in a way that works for you and serves you and your partner, you're essentially using someone else's blueprint in your relationship. And that's not, that's not a good thing.
Right. It may not be effective. How are you noticing the couples you're working with? How flexible are they with the fact that we're always changing as human beings? You're, kind of saying like, me, you should know this about me, but that person has changed. So it's hard to really always know our partner without taking the time. But how are you seeing that shift happen, no matter how long they've been married?
Yeah, so it happens quite slowly. I think, like I said, people, that whole leaving things to assumption thing happens a lot. And I have to remind people, I'm like, he's not a mind reader or she's not a mind reader. And I think there's also such a huge burden placed on the other person. Like, not that they should be a mind reader, but they're kind of saying it without saying it. Like, but they should know because they know me. And I'm like, sometimes I don't even know myself, you know?
Right.
And so I just think don't leave anything to assumption. And also sometimes there's a lot of fear. So if I kind of say this, what are they going to think? Or are they going to think, can you let me? Or that's not the person that they married, or that's not the person they got into a relationship with. And so there's a little bit of fear of like, should I say that? Maybe I'll just leave it and they'll get it.
Yeah. Well, I want to share a story with you of my own personal experience in my marriage. But before I do that, I'm going to share it because I got a segue. Let's start talking about grief, because that's what I do every episode. We talk about hidden grief. And when we're talking about hidden grief, we're not really looking at grief related to death, though that has grief with it clearly. We're looking at all the other things that create grief, the transitions and the changes, the way that we thought life would or should go and how it actually is. It can come due to health issues, relationship problems, an ending of a relationship, or boundaries that need to occur. Us not feeling like we are where we wanted to be in our lives. So the quarter life crisis or midlife crisis really is a transition of hidden grief, though we tend to act out in different ways during that time. So the story I want to share is my husband and I have been together for many years now, but we've lived here in Germany for 6 years. And my husband is native German. And I realized 6 years later, I've had to learn my husband in his home country. Like I've had to learn Germany husband versus American husband when we lived there. And I've had to mold myself, or not mold, but grow into who I am as Katie in Germany. And he's having to learn that. And you change and you have to go, do I really like this version of this person? And do I really like this version of myself? And sometimes you've got to grieve the old, including in your partner. And I think this happens whether you move or not. We all grow up and we all change and shift. And especially if you've had certain situations, maybe when you married your partner, they weren't so career driven. And then as they move up the ladder, then it's like all about their career. And you're like, hey, I miss this version of you. It doesn't give a lot of leeway for they're allowed to develop. And maybe for the last 5 years, they've been this way, but the next 5 years, they're going to be different. There's still grief work that has to happen in that. And when I had that realization, it was all of a sudden like this muscle tension that I'd held on to towards my husband was like released, because it was like, oh, I just need to get to know him again in this whole different way, because he's learning himself as well. In the expat episode, we talked about the I am a triangle movement. And, he doesn't fit in my home country and he doesn't fit in his home country because he's different now. And likewise, in my home country, I no longer fit. So he's got to figure out his identity, which has grief in it. And when you come together and you don't communicate and you don't do exactly what you said, like inform, like, hey, this is what I need right now, you'll clash. And I think that's amazing. What you do is helping people seek that clarity together and that understanding.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head there when you said, this is what I need right now, because I speak to so many women when I used to work with predominantly women, and I'd sometimes ask them, so what do you need from this? And there's some people who physically just, it won't come up out of their throat because they've always been told that they have to kind of fit in this box or adapt to, the man in their life more. And this is more predominantly as well in the South Asian community. And so suddenly when it's like, but what do you need from this? I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
I don't know. Because I do something which Lisa Nichols talks about, which is carefrontation versus confrontation. And it's the way you approach how you speak to someone. And with that, you really need to know what you want in order to put it forward to the other person in a way that lands with them so that you end up getting what you want. And you don't feel like you just say something and then when it doesn't happen, you're like, well, I told you, I wanted to do that, but it hasn't landed with them and you haven't been very clear and specific, most likely because you're just unable to say this is what I need. So it's so interesting. But thanks for sharing your story on the expat grief, and I love it, and I wish I'd never considered it. I moved around a lot as a child. Every 3.5 to 4 years, I moved until I was about, well, yeah, pretty much until I was 30. I moved every sort of 3 to 5 years, and then I stayed in London for 9 years. And every time I moved, the first year was not fun, and I never thought of it as grief. I just thought, maybe I take a little longer to just adapt. Maybe, my personality takes a little longer to adapt versus like my brother who adapted a lot, more easily. So it's really interesting that there could have been elements of grief for having left another city and moved to a new one.
Yeah, I share a similar childhood. Every 2 to 3 years we moved. And I always joke the longest I'd lived in one place till I was like 19 or 20 was like the 4 years of college because we were always moving. And it wasn't until I was older that I realized in high school, it really sucked. And I don't know how it was for you, but when it came time for the end of the year, like superlatives in the yearbook, like who's the funniest and no one really knew me well enough to like vote me for anything. And I always really kind of wanted to be in the book, like I want to be, there's that grief of every time you make this group of friends, and I'm sure you experience this, you have these like, oh, we'll go to this concert together, or we'll go do this together. And then you have to move and you have to let go of all those dreams and wishes and the way you envisioned your life. And as a kid, you don't visualize it that way. But later you realize like, oh, I was constantly having to uproot, and that as grief.
Yeah. And I'll tell you something so crazy. When I moved back to London as a single parent just before my 30th birthday, and then went on to live in London for 9 years. I'm 38 now. I stayed on a pay-as-you-go SIM card for
Did you? Yeah.
9 years on a pay-as-you-go SIM card, because every time I thought, okay, I'm just going to go on a contract, like I live here, I was like, nope. But what if next year is going to be the year that I decide to move? So for 9 years, and people just thought I was crazy. That like every month you just, and I justified it. I was like, yeah, it just means that if I travel for 6 weeks, I'm not having to top up my phone because I'm like away. But now I look back, I think it was just, do I commit to this place by getting a phone contract, or do I just,
And it creates almost an anxiety or a fear. And yeah, I hear you. I remember my mother would move furniture once we finally stayed. My parents divorced, we stayed in one place, and she would move the furniture every couple of years. And she'd be like, I need a change. And I was like, Mom, you're just so used to moving now. For so many years, it was, I guess, 15 years of her life, even more, was moving. It's almost this unsettled feeling. Yeah.
But in divorce coaching, that's actually one of the things we do say to people. I do say to people, I'm like, if you need to, if you've stayed in the house, move the furniture around. Because in a way you disassociate from the kind of old life, or with your partner, where it was a certain way, you sat a certain way, faced the TV a certain way, spent time together. So moving your furniture around actually creates a change for you.
That's smart. That's extremely smart. Well, how else are you seeing hidden grief showing up in your clients' lives?
Yeah, so it's just, I used to do this talk, and when I did it, I would say I never want to trivialize death, but death and divorce, are similar in the sense that the stages of great grief that you go to. So divorce is kind of supposed to be statistically the second most painful thing that you experience. And you go through the same stages, the same stages of grief, the 5 stages. You're denying it, regretting it, and you do this even when you've made the choice So often there's an assumption again that if you've made the choice to leave, like I made the choice to leave, for example, and I thought, okay, and yes, of course, there was like a lot of relief dropping off my shoulders, like, like I'm in a kind of good and safe space now. But as the years went on, there was a sense of grief, not as much for the relationship, but as for the life that I had planned in my mind for the next 10, 15, 20 plus years, right? So I moved, for example, just before I was 30, and I was gutted that I didn't get to celebrate my 30th birthday with all my friends, because I lived in Hong Kong when I was married, and then I moved to London, literally like with what I had. And so suddenly my 30th birthday came around, and I was like, this is not the party that I planned. I didn't even have a party. So, it was grieving that. And then it was grieving the fact that I was now raising my child on my own, which, wouldn't have been something I would have chosen to do. And so, yeah, grief, I see that with a lot of clients, in that it's not the life they thought or they signed up for. It's not the life they signed up for.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. And it's a shedding of the old skin, that like this no longer fits.
Yeah.
It's time to let it go. Yeah, I think you're so true. And like you said, whether you chose to leave or not, there's grief to be had on all levels.
Mm-hmm.
And we can be grateful that we are on our own, and also grieve that there's this loss. There's this big change.
Exactly. The duality exists. I think sometimes, people focus on the fact that, like, I always say to people when they start with me, I'm like, one of the things you're going to do over the 6 weeks, but I hope you do it beyond, is a gratitude practice. But sometimes what I find is that people will use gratitude as like to put up with certain things. And so it's like, oh, I shouldn't feel sad that, I got divorced, because I'm so grateful that I have all this support from my family and stuff. And I shouldn't feel bad about this, because I'm so grateful that I have the money and the resources to take care of myself and my child. But it's like, actually, they can both exist. You can feel really sad about that and still grateful that you have that. Like, don't, what's the word I'm looking for? Don't like diminish that feeling.
Right.
Just because, you're grateful. You can sit with both of those things.
And it's that shoulding on yourself. I always say, don't should on yourself, that like, well, I'm supposed to. And that's typically how we were conditioned in our childhood as well. Like, good little girls do this, or good little boys do this. And it's like, okay, well.
Yeah. And you never really hear like naughty little girls.
Right. But they're the ones everybody remembers, right? I remember the ones who always got in trouble in school, and then I see what they do now and I go, wow, you're like amazing. But we're conditioned to think that's a bad thing at a certain age.
Yeah, totally. I was the quote unquote good girl. And it was only after I separated that I'm not like the bad girl now, but I'm authentic to myself.
Yeah.
And when I go back and look at like diaries and stuff like that, that I wrote, I'm like, I always had those thoughts. I look back and I'm like, oh, because I'd write them. I loved writing. So I was like, I always had those thoughts. I just didn't verbalize them. And I meet so many female clients like that. Like, that spark is there, but they've always been told they're the good ones. They have to be the responsible ones, especially if they're like an eldest child. And so it's almost like they're put on this, not ladder, but pillar. They're put up on this pillar, and then suddenly they want to come down, but they're looking down and like, this is too high. I'm just going to stay up here. But they're not happy up there, because the expectations people have of them are so high that they just feel like they can't meet them, and then that's leading to them being unhappy.
That's so true. Oh, gosh, that could be a whole other episode.
Just bringing the pillar down slowly, stepping off of it, and being like, this is who I want to be. This is who I am.
And I love what you said. It's slowly. We always think we just need to change immediately, and it's like, whoa, that's shock to the system. But if you slowly adjust and change, then it's much easier for your mind and your emotions to comprehend what's happening. Yeah. Well, how are you seeing fellow relationship coaches tackle this hidden grief? Is there are you finding they're well educated in how to work with people in hidden grief, or are you finding that that's sort of lacking in the training around it?
Yeah. So I was quite lucky when I went into not so much the relationship coaching, but the divorce coaching, because it seems like a more obvious grief there as opposed to the hidden grief. The person, Sarah Davison, who I did the accreditation with, covers grief in depth. And so I guess using that training within even relationship coaching, I could do it. I'm not sure about other coaches and how they tackle hidden grief specifically, but I think, hopefully with people like you speaking up about it, that people will start to become aware that actually there is a lot of grief even within relationships where couples are still together but just not who they were when they got together.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you, Natasha. Where can people find you if they'd like to work with you?
Yeah, so my website is www.natashamahtani.com, but I'm on Instagram all the time. I love Instagram, and on Instagram I'm Natasha Coaches.
Excellent. Wonderful. And the last question I ask all of those I'm interviewing, what's the funniest experience you've had as a relationship coach?
Oh, I have to think about that one for a second. The funniest experience. I don't know if I've had any funny experiences. I can't think of anything funny. I've had a lot of obviously people being like, oh, like aha, huge aha moments and stuff like that, which when they get it, I guess it's not funny, but it's amazing to just see them go from here to here in obviously they've had a few sessions when they get there, but I don't think I've seen anything really funny yet.
No, but I think sometimes when we hit those realizations, it leads to laughter because it's like,
So there's a lot of laughing, but it's very nervous laughing.
Yeah. This is so true.
Yeah, well, that is funny, I guess. I had one client who would just say something and start laughing every time. But I think it's also with that, the reason I didn't bring that up is because for me, that's a sort of unregulated nervous system, right? Yeah. To regulates to be like, actually that's not funny, right? Like you have to, right. You're just responding because she was so nervous, she'd say something and then giggle almost.
Yeah. It's good you're aware of that, but I yes, those aha moments bring their own humor with them of like, I can release this. Yeah. Well, if you're watching this and what Natasha and I shared about, you're like, ooh, I need to learn more about hidden grief and working with my clients or doing your own work, please feel free to go to www.katieressler.com and click on certification to learn about the Legacy Growth Certification Program. I teach you how to work with your clients on hidden grief, no matter what your focus area is, tailoring it to the work that you do. Thank you again, Natasha, and I've loved having you on here, and this was a wonderful, wonderful conversation.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, and I will just say to your viewers that you have an amazing self-forgiveness meditation on your website that they should check out. So
thank you. Thank you. I'll make sure that link is somewhere as well with your website links too, so people can check it out. Very good. Bye, everyone.
Bye.